these things. So I'm going to let you start the conversation. So I'm recording now.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, Monica.
Hi. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, and I just need a little bit of help and some advice on where to next with my situation.
Okay. Tell us what's been happening.
So I think about 3 weeks ago, I sent the email to the principal. So I'm a primary school teacher. I sent the email to my principal, the documents that were that you had sent me.
Yeah.
So and also included, the diplomatic, the card, my card,
yeah,
copy of it. I sent it, so I haven't heard a response, so I've just been carrying out my duties off-site. I haven't been able to be on site while the children are there, so I've just been carrying out my duties off-site online. So yesterday I managed to go inside and for the cleanup last day, and then my principal, she mentioned to me, what's your next steps for next year? So I said, oh well, I'm not going to get the vaccine, and I've mentioned that several times, and she's aware of that, and then she just said what she'll need from me is a letter of resignation.
Well, isn't that interesting that she worded it like that? Yeah. Asking for a letter of resignation is basically asking you for the consent to stand down, because they don't have the power to stand you down.
Yes.
The Ministry of Education minister is what's that guy? Is it someone Hipkins? Is it?
Oh yeah, Chris.
Yeah, Chris Hipkins. He is the Minister of Education, and I am challenging the Ministry of Education at the moment because they have used ethnic discrimination against Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa Embassy, Maori Ranger Security Division, and our diplomatic mission for the people of the Pacific. And they posted, with the permission of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, which is Nanaia Mahuta, she's the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, they got the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade to endorse a ethnically discriminating public notice on the Education New Zealand website that basically said that our cards were bogus and fake. And then they, a Radio New Zealand Ministry of Education correspondent for Radio New Zealand, John Gerritsen, then did a midday report about Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa, our diplomatic mission, and our Native and Indigenous identity diplomatic immunity cards. But they didn't mention our organisation, because obviously, according to the broadcasting standards, I think it's Section 6, it's very clear that no ethnic discrimination can be targeted towards one area of the population for cultural, religious or political views. And so they labelled the cards as fake and bogus diplomatic immunity cards. Now, there's a lot of collaboration going on behind the scenes. So from your perspective as a teacher, you instinctively know that what the schools are doing is unethical and unlawful.
Absolutely.
You're taking a stance, but from their point of view, from the Ministry of Education's point of view, with Chris Hipkins being a massive promoter of the COVID vaccine and also being the Minister of Education, I question how he is allowed to have that role. Why has he got that role? Because our children are the most, and young people are the most vulnerable in society. Now, so this is a classic example of systemic racism. So a couple of years ago, we had it with Oranga Tamariki. Yes. And Oranga Tamariki based their plannings, to remove Māori children on the Dunedin Study. So the Dunedin Study being conducted by Otago University is extremely racially discriminating towards Māori. And so they use the Dunedin Study to influence the ministers, and then they get into the ministries and then start dictating the policies.
Yes.
Okay, so the racism comes from Otago University, and I'm going to do a video about this of, Otago University is the cause of a lot of the systemic racism problems in this country because of the Dunedin Study, and then they used the Dunedin Study as a way to profile prospective criminals, and they're even proud of their slogan, which is the Dunedin Study being able to identify criminals in kindergarten children. So they target kids. So when you look at Oranga Tamariki, there's been massive changes happening. So I'm thankful for that,
Yeah,
but
I've seen that,
that was a massive collective effort across the board amongst government personnel, amongst non-government organisations like Māori Ranger Security Division, and just across the public. And the amazing reporter who what's her name? She did the story about.
Yes, I watched the story. Yes, I forgot what her name was, but I did.
Yeah,
she's in the hospital. The one that was.
She's brilliant. Yeah. Oh my God, she's my favourite journalist. In New Zealand because she does some amazing stories. Like, but that's another topic. And she was able to shine the light.
Yes.
On the problem at Hastings Hospital. Now, you've got to wonder why Hastings Hospital and why certain hospitals are being targeted to uplift the children. Okay, so the children are the collateral damage here. These ministers, these universities, these premeditated, long-standing systemic racist promoters are working hard in the background, and they're working with Nanaia-Mahuta, because Nanaia-Mahuta is claiming to be Indigenous, and really she's harming the Indigenous people profoundly. Yes. So I am going to take the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Radio New Zealand to task based on those ethnic discriminating like media reports. And even the other night Jacinda Ardern did a media announcement on Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa Embassy.
Oh, she did? I haven't been following her. I can't stand watching.
I can't stand her either. So so
that's interesting.
So she has claimed that the cards are bogus and fake. So they are really working hard. You've got Jacinda, Nanaia-Mahuta, Chris Hipkins working hard in the background, targeting our most vulnerable in society, which is, the young people.
Yes.
And we effectively are the only thing acting as a buffer, preventing that from happening full-fledged. Yeah. So they've got to be really careful with how they deal with us because of the Indigenous laws that protect us, and especially with Nanaia-Mahuta, using the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples to forward her career with the Three Waters horror. And just so Nanaia-Mahuta can't directly target us. She's been indirectly targeting me through the police. The police actually told me. So last year, after the 28th of October Hui 2020, we passed an Indigenous law that forbade anyone who sold the seabed and foreshore from having a representative position for the people of the Pacific, and she did that. And then 6 days later, she became the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and she's been using the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples to forward herself. So she can't directly go against Indigenous embassies or our diplomatic mission, our Indigenous Pacific Island diplomatic mission.
Mm-hmm.
So she's been using the Ministry of, she's been using the police. The police told me that she was the reason why they arrested me, and the police down in Christchurch, because they didn't know. They were bragging. I was like, why are you arresting me? And they said, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade says that, she doesn't recognise you. So that was a breach of the Policing Act 2008.
Yeah, so how does that work? Did they get what were the consequences for them doing that to
I
you?
went to court a few times, and everything was geared up against me. But I actually told the High Court, and I told the judges, I said, look, Nanaia-Mahuta is using political persecution against me. She's in violation of malfeasance of public office, and in violation of the Policing Act 2008, Section 30, Command and Control, that no police officer can act under the control directions of a Minister of the Crown. And the judge responded, and he said there's no evidence of that. And I said, the policeman told me, there was like 3 or 4 of them, because they didn't know. They were just telling me this is why, so they were innocently telling me. And I knew that was Nanaia-Mahuta, because, I've been following politics for a long time. So I'm wanting to subpoena or get the police in as witnesses to do a case against Nanaia-Mahuta, because she's been interfering with our diplomatic mission. She's been interfering with the international courts, and now she's been indirectly interfering with the rights of, the teachers and anyone that doesn't want a vaccine through the Ministry of Education. So there's a massive network of collusion happening in the background, but unfortunately for them, I'm completely aware of how they're operating, so I'm ousting them at every step of the way. So the only reason why the Ministry of Education came up against me is because a flurry of teachers started using the paperwork and the Te Waitangi Obligations and the various Native and Indigenous international conventions that protect us, and the Bill of Rights Act. So there was a flurry of teachers that started submitting that paperwork to the Ministry of Education. And so they had to show a stance of stronghold and publicly denounce our diplomatic mission. But in doing that, they've actually jeopardized their positions. They cannot operate without Māori consent. Now, this happens the government is forbidden to operate without the Māori consent, and this happens every single year. They must have permission or they cannot operate, and this has been happening since 1986, because prior to 1986 the government was still attached to the monarchy, or the British monarchy, and it was effectively a proper government in terms of international law and governments. In 1986, who was it? I think it was Muldoon or Jim Bolger, or a bunch of crooks like Geoffrey Palmer, like a bunch of basically white-collar criminals decided to remove New Zealand, the Constitution, which I think it was the 1852 or 1952. I'm just speaking from the top of my head, but you can go and Google the New Zealand Constitution, and they attempted to remove New Zealand from the British monarch, and they also attempted to remove the Constitution that protected the people. And then they created New Zealand Corporation, the New Zealand Corporation.
That's what the SEC, they registered there, eh?
Yes, that's right. But by doing this, it shot themselves in the foot, because the British monarch will still uphold their agreement to protect Māori, because in royal declarations there are royal obligations, and to this day they will still help us if we need their help. So what's been happening is a bunch of people have been utilising Waitangi as a siphoning mechanism for funding, and as a way to act as a filter so nobody can really get their message across to the British monarch. So there's a lot of corruption going on, and when the Ministry of Education, Chris Hipkins, Nanaia Mahuta and Radio New Zealand denounced or discredited Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa Embassy and our diplomatic mission and our diplomatic immunity cards, they have shot themselves in the foot, because this could backfire on them. They have to uphold the terms of and conditions of the Te Tiriti o Waitangi Obligations. I'm one of the members of the receiving state by Te Tiriti o Waitangi and Te Whakaputanga, and I'm an Indigenous woman of the islands of Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa, and my whānau were here before the Great Waka Migration, and we've got the whakapapa to prove that. So they've got to be very careful with how they play this, because they could effectively lose their positions of power. So when it comes to your boss and her request to for you to hand in your resignation, I'm pretty convinced that she's feeling empowered to make such an unethical request towards you because of the propaganda circulating around, coming out of the Ministry of Education. But in saying that, they cannot override your original contract. Now, in your original work contract that you signed when you commenced your job, there would be terms and conditions. And I guarantee there's going to be no terms and conditions that state you had to take experimental medical treatment.
Yeah, I can confirm that there's nothing like that within my contract. I've read that thing.
So contract law is very powerful in New Zealand. Contract law is how the New Zealand police and Oranga Tamariki trick people into, signing the papers. That's the only power they have in order to arrest you or put you into jail or take your child. Now, use contract law. Go to the Google and just Google contract law.
Okay.
Employment contracts. Learn your rights. Go to the various acts that protect you. So if the New Zealand Ministry of Education is disregarding the Te Tiriti o Waitangi Obligations, which is actually against their code and conduct,
yes,
they actually state they
have to uphold.
What the hell are they doing? The Indigenous version is the only text that stands, and that states that the Wakamingi o Ngā Hapu is the authoritative body. And so as Native and Indigenous people, we are part of the Wakamingi o Ngā Hapu. So we make the rules, not them.
But they like to tell everyone that they are they're the only ones that can do that. And, it's unfortunate that people don't know, what's really going on, and they're all just making us look like we are just making things up,
Yeah, and the ironic aspect of what you just said is that it's actually the teachers teaching misinformation in the schools that has caused our people to be have their minds full of propaganda. So it's quite interesting to be able to help the teachers. I'm hoping
it's been a real eye-opener for me. I've only just really learnt the real history of this recently, within this year, and so I really want to, I want to be in education to teach the right things to our kids. And that's what it is, to inform them that actually, this is what really is, this is the truth.
If we taught human rights and international Indigenous laws in the schools, we would have less people in the prisons.
Exactly.
If we encourage diplomacy and diplomatic conduct, we're going to have less cost on the state. The state has geared everything up to harm us.
Exactly.
So
that's what it was designed for.
So what we're going to do, that was a bit of a rant, but okay, so step one, go to your step A would be just with a magnifying glass, just go over your original
contract.
Yep. Employer's contract. And then step B would be go to the what is it? Employers Act. I think there'll be an Employers Act on New Zealand legislation, eh?
Should be. So Employers Act?
Yeah. I don't know if that's the actual name of it,
Okay.
but
I'll have a look into it.
it's probably the Employers Act, I'm just guessing, or something similar. Okay, read that and look for any loopholes that can get you out of the situation,
Okay.
and then present that the next time you're having a meeting with your boss. And step C would be to not resign and force them into a position of having to make a move. So if you imagine that you're playing chess and a certain player can't take your bishop or your pawn or something without you initiating an error move first. So they're using mind. What are they? They're using psychological methods to try and peer pressure you into resigning.
Yeah.
Okay, so imagine you're playing a game of chess and you're going to win because you've got all the right pieces. You've got the Indigenous law, you've got the Te Tiriti o Waitangi, you've got the He Whakaputanga, you've got your employer's contract that they can't break, you've got your human rights, your rights to refuse, experimental medical treatments. So you've got a flurry of good pieces and good moves that that if you make them, you're going to win. They have nothing. They're relying upon psychological persuasion.
Exactly.
They're trying to entrap you into consenting to something you don't have to consent to.
Oh, that's the first thing I thought of when I had that conversation yesterday, that I would have to write out a letter of resignation. That was the first thing. I was like, no, because this is, you're not going to coerce me into resigning.
Otherwise, they would have fired you. They would have fired you if they had the power.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because I have a friend who's going through the same thing, also a teacher, and they're really pushing her to resign, and I told her, no, whatever you do, don't let them do what they need to terminate you. So they're going through the board at the moment. My step hasn't quite got there yet. I think maybe she was hoping that I would just resign.
Yeah, because, our Polynesian people of the Pacific are very friendly, and we've been, people pick on us and we just comply and we're easy targets.
Yeah, and that's what we don't need right now. I mean, we need to stand, otherwise.
We are the last. See, people need to be very careful about squandering our Native and Indigenous rights.
Yeah.
They should be very, very careful with that, because we are the last buffer between totalitarian government control and actual proper freedom. Now, so before I did this, I used to be a poker player, and I used to play in Las Vegas and around the world. So one of my my skills is warfare strategy, psychological game plan, and I'd use my ability to assess the situation and to basically assess every competitor. And when I had a really good hand, I'm going to be trying to get everyone to go all in so that I can get maximum extraction, and that the reward risk ratio was always in my favor. And I had an unorthodox way of playing poker, because I was a female, and people always assume that females are not risk takers. But in this case, this is pretty risky business, what we do, going up against the government.
Absolutely.
It's a David and Goliath kind of biblical situation. But I know we've got the best cards.
Yeah, I think so too.
We've got the royal flush. We've got the royal flush. We're going to win. We can only lose if we fold our cards, or if we do something stupid. We are sitting at the table with predators, okay? Like, our competition, our the New Zealand government ministers have everything in their favour. They've got money, power, the ability to broadcast nationally and have international influence. But we have the best cards, and we are going to win.
I know that too. I actually feel it with it. I'm such a person that, intuitive, and this just feels so right. Like, with what you guys are doing, and it just, it's just got to, like you said, we've got the cards. We just got to play them right.
And it's really interesting because for 180 years, I think to myself, okay, every generation of our tupuna would have gone through. Every generation and decade would have had their own systemic racist hurdles that was unique to that decade.
Yeah, to that time, yeah.
We're in a completely new game, and we need to have the ability to shapeshift our way around the new problems that are just coming at us every single week. And I feel like the diplomatic community cards are that.
Yes.
That we've just, like, they came in the nick of time. Like, if we didn't do this, if we only launched now instead of 2 years ago, where would we, there's no fucking way we would have a shit show in hell.
No.
So the timing is amazing. Timing is on our side. The consciousness is lifting. We just needed someone to stand up and say the truth.
Yeah, and they're not liking it.
Yeah, and also I wonder why other Māori authorities don't do what we do. I think we're the only Māori authority not taking any funding from COVID. I think we're the only Māori, Native, Indigenous Māori service providers that have a strong stance openly, not even scared to say it, that we do not condone vaccines. It's like looking Mike Tyson in the eye, like a little blonde girl looking Mike Tyson in the eye and, telling him, I'm not going to do what you want. And then them having to buckle down because what can,
Yeah.
And who's in their right mind is going to do that? And I think a lot of the Māori authorities are maybe cowards.
Yeah, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, they use the power, they got money, they got resources.
And they don't want to lose that position of power.
Yeah.
I don't mind the Māori authorities, a lot of them. Like, I think, okay, so they're having to sell their souls to get the funding to help the people. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. But I have a real problem with Nanaia going out of her way to target us. The other Māori authorities don't even care. Like, they're just taking the funding and trying to do their best for, Māoridom or whatever. They're playing the game. They're going to the ball and having to play the game. I'm not at the ball. I'm just standing out in the fucking field by myself. And I would have been okay doing that. But Nanaia has decided to come out of the ball and leave the dance and come and actually try and snuff me out while no one's looking.
Well, that's because they want to do that to the truth. They don't want it to get out there because then their plan's going to, crumble. And that's exactly why
it's an evil plan. Nanaia has an evil plan. One of the other problems with Te Puni is that all Māori land that's in trusts comes under, I think it's Te Tumu Pairo, and that's the Māori land entity that's attached to Te Puni. So she's got a lot of power because power is given to people when they, are voted in, or if they have enough of the land geographic size. So Te Puni Kōkiri, Nanaia is in Te Puni Kōkiri. She's an international minister. She's a regional minister or a local, authority, like in the local authorities. She's got her finger in every single pie. Why does she have to try and snuff me out?
Yeah.
Because she's got an evil plan. She needs to use the United Nations Indigenous rights on, the rights of Indigenous peoples to forward her evil plan for Three Waters, which is evil plan. I don't know, have you watched the movie V for Vendetta?
No, I haven't.
The evil plan in V for Vendetta was poisoning the people from a water plant called Three Waters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, go to V for Vendetta and look at the plot, and it's quite.
It's funny you say that, because a lot of the movies are playing out what their plans are.
Yeah,
they like to put it out in the open. It's like a nice little game to them.
They have to give public announcement. That's one of the requirements and one of the rules. So when we do a YouTube video, that's effectively a public announcement.
Yes.
And I'm playing by their rules. I'm just saying it because for to be able to denounce what they are doing and discredit what they are doing, there's a power in the words. They're using broadcasting or witchcraft through the television. So broadcasting. So casting is to cast a spell.
Yes.
Broadcasting.
Television.
Yeah. And so that's what they're using, and we can do the same. And when we speak the words of truth, we dispel their words of lies. Yeah, and that's why I wrote the Kupapa Suppression Action 2020 law. I wrote it to dispel the Tohunga Suppression Act.
Yeah, good thing you did that.
Because, I mean, what else would a Tohunga do? Of course a Tohunga is going to try and dispel the Tohunga Suppression Act. Hey, why didn't anyone think of that earlier? You know?
Oh.
So there's a lot going on. It's the spiritual realm as well, but luckily we're in the Wairua, and that's real powerful. So, and we're all connected. We're all little mokopuna of the Pacific, eh? Like, we're all connected. And we are the tamariki, the babies of the gods.
Yeah, and have you heard from any other teachers who are in the same, boat as, Waka as myself?
I haven't. Since I did the video about helping the other school teachers create,
the stress teacher one, that one?
Yeah, so after I did that, I haven't really heard from any of the teachers apart from them sending me screenshots of the Ministry of Education discrediting Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa and our diplomatic immunity cards.
Oh, I see. Was this from the broadcast that they did?
There was 3. So Jacinda Ardern did one, I think, 4 nights ago on the COVID announcements. She denounced, discredited Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa Embassy and our diplomatic mission. The Ministry of Education, a woman called Iona, uploaded a public notice discrediting Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa and Māori Rangers. Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa Embassy and Māori Rangers Security Division, and our diplomatic mission. And that was put up on I think it's the education learning website or something, some kind of teacher's website.
Okay. I must have a look.
And then there was a Radio New Zealand announcement by John.
That's the one I saw. Yeah, that's the one I listened to.
So no one's really rang up in your situation. I think people, threw a punch, submitted the paperwork, received, another punch back from the Ministry of Education, and then I think they might have been disheartened and just succumbed to it and resigned.
Yeah, well, I just feel it's just really wrong for me to go and do what they, I don't want the vaccine. I'm standing for that, and I'm standing for this as well, and I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna resign. I'm just gonna let them do what they need to do, and then just go from there, really. Yeah,
especially as a Pacifica woman.
Yeah.
What are they doing? How dare they? How dare they go to Samoa in the, was it the 50s, and just open fire on peaceful protesters in the Mau movement?
The Mau movement, yes.
How dare they?
Yeah.
Samoa became independent in 1961, I believe.
62.
62, yes, that's right. And New Zealand is so colonized that people don't even know that the names of our islands are Te-Ika-A-Maui and Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa, and we're part of the collective, you know, Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa.
Yeah, it's interesting, eh? I mean, especially when you're just, indoctrinated, in the system, and you've just been taught these things, that's the whole programming us, and then it's just, and then once you wake up, you're like, oh my gosh.
Well, there's opportunity with every grey cloud. For example, there's a real opportunity for Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa teachers to create their own teaching and school infrastructures. We do not have to stay plugged into the New Zealand government structures, and there'll be enough people out there that want their kids taken care of but don't want their kids to go to public schooling.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. How do we get there? We need to pull it. Everyone needs to work together and come up with a plan where we can do something like that, because I think that'll be amazing.
Well, that's the idea of the cards. When you buy a card, you become part of the Te-Moana-Nui-A-Kiwa infrastructure and collective, and we don't even control people. We just go, oh yeah, you want to do that, go ahead. We go forth and prosper. We give the blessing. We're not into micromanaging or governing anyone. We're like, no, we're encouraging everyone to be self-autonomous and independent and go forth and prosper. But in the meantime, this battle has presented itself against the Ministry of Education, and we are here, and we have an obligation as tamariki, or babies of the gods, people of the Pacific, to really take the opportunity to, rebut everything that they've been doing, and a complete overhaul of the systemic propaganda that is being pumped out of the Ministry of Education is well overdue.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So that's my little piece of advice, although it's ultimately up to you. I can advise you as much as possible and give confidence to the situation, but like my resources are limited, and I'm basically just I think it's really up to the people now.
I get that. I understand that. Yeah, for sure. I think I know what I need to do. I need to have that conversation and just bring out, look for those things that you've just advised me on to have a look through. Find those loopholes, have that conversation. I might even just email the ministry myself with all of that.
And the purpose of this video is so that you can refer back to it. So I'll edit it now. I'll pop it up on YouTube, and anyone can just go to the video if they need assistance or reminding how to do it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's good. It's good to help others.
But thank you for this, because by helping you guys, I help myself.
Oh, thank you.
Because it's a lonely journey. It is.
It really is.
But it's a Wairua journey. So those who are still connected to the Wairua and our tupuna and like the atua and everyone, they're going to thrive, I think.
Absolutely, I think so too. And I've just, I just feel so right, like what I'm doing, what I'm standing for, to go against how I feel and to just, succumb to it. I think I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't find happiness in it. I feel like I wouldn't have peace doing anything opposite to what I'm doing right now. That makes sense.
And I'm glad I highlighted the issue of the Dunedin Study and the Otago University influence, because they've got the medical influence there. They took out 1,037 babies in Dunedin in 1972 or 1973 and tracked them for life.
Wow.
Now that's not fucking normal, man.
No.
And then they use that database to impose systemic racism policies into the ministerial structures. And then we, that trickles down, and then we end up in jail, and everyone's like, oh, why are there so many Māori in jail? Well, first of all, the iwis are signing off on the jails and getting funding for them.
Yeah.
And second of all, it's that they've designed the justice system and state care on the findings of the Dunedin Study, which are completely racist and planned. This has been planned for 50 years, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that aspect has been planned for 50 years, and we've got to detach ourselves from Otago University's learnings. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
But anyway, on that bright note, I'm almost like convinced that the traffic light system is some kind of crazy idea that has come from, just human experimentation on these islands. These islands have been used as experimentation, like islands that we can't escape.
Yeah.
And you look at Lake Alice with the hundreds of survivors who were like tortured and had electrical torture conducted on them by doctors in the 1970s. Now, the 1970s was when the Dunedin Study started.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got the Dunedin Study, 1,037 babies have been tracked for life. And
That's
then
crazy.
you've got Lake Alice in the 1970s with the doctors coming and raping kids and torturing kids.
Oh, this Lake Alice, the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a correlation between the Dunedin Study because it's sick. It's sick in the head.
Yeah, it is sick. It's all twisted. Yeah.
And the fact they've been using the Dunedin Study to forward their stupid medical experiments onto the, everyone else.
Yeah.
One of the complaints from the Royal Commission is one of the speakers from the Royal Commission mentioned that the children were sent to Lake Alice under the guise of mental illness, but he said not one of them were mentally sick. They were hand-selected to be tortured and raped.
Oh, that's disgusting. That's sick.
In the 1970s, the police didn't help those survivors. No. 1,037 fucking babies.
Yeah.
What doctor thought to do the Dunedin Study on 1,037 babies, and it's still being done now? Like they don't leave. They're still in it.
Oh my gosh.
What about those people? Are they okay?
Yeah, exactly.
So the traffic light system and the vaccines and all that, it's all part of the weird experiment that's coming out of, I believe, Otago University and the Dunedin Study. And until people identify their enemy, I mean, the first rule of war would be identify the enemy and identify the traitors. You've got no shit show in hell of winning any war if you allow traitors to flourish, or if you don't even know who the fucking enemy is.
Exactly, which is what's happening right now, because a lot of people don't know who the enemy is.
And then I wonder, why do I know all this stuff? Like, where does it come from? The reason I'm expressing it in this video is to let people know, because I feel like I've been holding on to a lot of information and I should have spoken out about it earlier. But only now it seems to make sense to me, the correlations.
Yeah, well, I think now's a good time for everyone to know.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm going to go. I've got heaps of cards to do. And I thank you for calling, and
no worries. That's cool.
And let me know how it goes as well.
Yes, I will let you know how it goes.
Oh, and when you enter the interview with your boss, pretend you're going into a game of chess and the boss is the opposition. and you're playing a game of chess against them, and imagine you're playing this game of chess. So when they try and throw something at you, you throw another move back at them.
Yeah.
Don't.
So it hasn't been. We haven't confirmed the date for the next meeting, but there will definitely be one. So
that's fine. Just in the interim, research all the knowledge that you are going to require, and then when you enter into that interview, do not perceive them as being the boss. Perceive them as being a chess opponent, and you're going to go in with the best moves and the best pieces, and you're going to win.
And I think that's where the mind has to shift, where you're not going in as like exactly what you said, where they're the boss, and like it's a real game. Like it's a.
If you're a sports person, like a rower, then use that. You're going in to win the race. So our people are good sports people. So when we apply the mental attributes required for winning at sport, when we apply them into a situation where you've got a boss and then you've got, the worker kind of situation, go in with the sports mentality to win.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to keep that in the back of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Because our people are good sportsmen. Oh my God. I think, imagine if everyone did that.
Yeah, no, really.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, oh my God. I was just like making it up on the spot, but yeah. Yeah. Good times.
Love it.
Yay. Okay, I'm going to go now.
Okay, then cool. No, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
I'll text you. My sister had cards with her kids. I'll just text you the info.
Yeah.
If you could just check up on that for us.
Sure, no problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.